The Canucks are in trouble. They've looked really bad. It's strange, though, because are they as bad as Ottawa? Well, they swept Ottawa, but then Ottawa won a game against Montreal, which the Canucks have done, right? They won one. Anyways, the way they've looked now has been embarrassing. The way they played against Montreal, these back-to-back games against Toronto, and the problems that we're seeing, we're obviously trying to figure out why are these problems happening, and is it fixable? And I feel like the problems that we've seen them have were there last season, season before, and even in the playoffs when they were playing well, they would bounce between these two modes of play where they would usually come storming out in the first period. They'd look great, and then they would just get hemmed in. And like I said in the last video, it is a problem of depth. They don't have enough depth. They have people playing in the wrong position, in the wrong spot on the depth chart. And they had a problem with their defense last year, and they got rid of two of their better defensemen. You know, Stetcher, let's look at Stetcher. Stetcher's not a big guy. He doesn't have an amazing shot, but he can score. He's a pretty decent passer. He's a smooth skater. He's a real heart and soul guy who will give everything he has. The Canucks are lacking that. They could really use that. He's also incredibly cheap, which the Canucks could use. Because they're one of their biggest problems, other than a lack of that type of attitude and skill and depth, is that obviously they have a terrible cap situation that Benning and the ownership have gotten themselves into. I mean, you look now, people calling for the firing of Benning, they should have probably done that when he first signed all those veterans and overpaid for them. He didn't expect Pettersson and Hughes to come out so fast. So if they were still in development and you had another year or so of them just being terrible and getting better draft picks, I guess that was their plan. But here we are. Pettersson and Hughes, at least in the last year or so, have been great. They're struggling. But who isn't struggling on this team? There's only one person who's not struggling on this team, and that's Höglander. And that's why he's in the middle. Let's go through the roster. We were talking about Stetcher. That was such a stupid mistake to let him go. I guess they just don't like him. But compared to anything else you'd get for that money, he's good. Some advanced stats Twitter account was just tweeting about him, saying that in a Detroit win against Florida, Stetcher was the best guy on the ice in terms of advanced stats. I haven't dove really deep in advanced stats. I'm always about just watch the game. It's all about shift to shift and game to game. You can tell when a guy makes a good decision or not. Stats are going to tell you some things, but they're also limited by what else is going on the ice, right? But I think with the eye test, I always felt like Stetcher was a decent guy to have on your third pairing. He was better than Fantenberg. He was better than Ben. He's better than Hamonic we've seen. He still got walked here and there and he got overwhelmed sometimes. But I feel like I would much rather see him on the ice than Tyler Myers. And Toffoli was only in the regular season with the Canucks for 10 games, and he had a pretty decent playoff. For $4 million, yeah, you'd probably rather have him. That was really stupid that Benning let him go. Tanev. If you could get Tanev for, $4 million, $5 million for a few years, that would have been nice. That would have been really nice. Markstrom, too many years, too many millions. Goalies are so unpredictable. You got Demko. Goaltending is not the problem for the team. Markstrom is amazing. He is great, and I'm glad he just got 2 shutouts this year in Calgary. One against the Canucks, and I don't know who he got the other one against. But he struggled so hard to get shutouts in this team. It's not hard to see why. Watch them play defense. All right, well, that's who's gone. Oh, man. Even if you just, out of all those guys, you kept Stetcher and Levo. $1 million. You're telling me Levo wouldn't be more useful right now than Antoine Roussel? than Louis Eriksson, than Adam Gaudette. Let's look at this team now. All right. This is something that pissed me off so much. See the number 21 here? Louis Eriksson. When they brought Louis in, I thought, great. So far, Antoine Roussel and Adam Gaudette have been total negatives for the Canucks. They're not tough. They take a lot of penalties. They chase the puck a lot. They are not great defensively. And they go out there and they lose shifts over and over again. Maybe Gaudette could find life on a third line. If you can get a proper third line center in here that is as stable as Sutter and Beagle, but has more offense, more playmaking. Maybe Gaudette could work as a winger. Maybe. Roussel is terrible. I don't even want to see him on the fourth line. And the way Green has done his lines here is he's got his two top lines. I think he's afraid of Miller. He's got his two top lines. He's got his Miller line. He's got his Horvat line. His Pettersson line and his Horvat line. That's what we'll call them, because he's very rarely plays Pettersson on the wing. But those are his two centers. And then he's got usually this Tyler Mott line and Beagle, and that plays the third most minutes. And then he always has a very sparingly played fourth line. And if the Canucks were kicking ass with these three lines, sure, you can get away with that. But I think this team looks exhausted. They look so tired, and they should be. I think that the Canucks have played probably the most games in the days that the season's been going out of any other team. And that's a real serious problem. And I think that the team looks pretty exhausted. Maybe they're not as bad as they are right now, as they look. Maybe it's a pure exhaustion thing, and that could make sense. I think what seems to be the big problem with them is that they can't get out of their zone, and they can't stop people from getting into their zone. They're making these Hail Mary stretch passes all over the place, and I think it's because either their systems are terrible, which is something I suspected in the playoffs, because it seemed like, man, they just can't get going, or it's a talent thing. Now, if we look at their defense, Nate Schmidt, some people are probably schmitting all over him because they see the way that the team is playing, but really, I think he's probably their best overall defenseman by far. I'm glad they have him. I think that, he was the number one defenseman in Vegas for years until they decided they wanted to make an upgrade. And they were a great team. They purely overwhelmed the Canucks, and he was leading the charge on their defense. He's good. He can move. He can pass. He can shoot a little. He's a good team guy, although I think because he's so new to the team, I don't think he's been able to totally sort of institute his personality and take ownership of it. But he hasn't looked amazing, but nobody has, and I think it's impossible. Hockey is a team game, and the way they're playing now, nobody's going to look amazing except for Höglander. Everybody's a winger, and you can get away with that. But on defense, Schmidt's the best they have so far. Hughes looks, I don't know, he looks hurt. He looks slower. You see people catching up to him. He doesn't look very, what would you say? He doesn't look dominant. He doesn't look like he's able to take over. He looks nervous, but most of the Canucks look nervous because they have so many giveaways. Myers, I think, was a horrible signing by Jim Benning. Was anybody else going after this guy? Did they have to give him $6 million over 6 years or 5 years? Crazy. He's been a third pairing defenseman after his big Calder Trophy year. Those teams put him on the third line. They knew. All you had to do was watch him play. The guy is slow. He takes a lot of stupid penalties because of his size, his lack of speed. He has pretty good hands and he can maneuver around, but big deal. We need you to be able to grab a puck quickly and get it out of your zone. We need you to outmuscle offensive players. He is incapable of doing that beyond a third pairing role. You would much rather have Stetcher back there for $1 million. I'd rather see Fantenberg on the third pairing. And I definitely want to see Myers play in the third pairing. Hughes is going to come around. He's a young guy, and they took away Tanev, and they've said, go out there and play the most minutes out of anybody. Constant power play. And he's a product of their system and their depth. Jordy Ben. When Ben and Vandenberg were playing together in the playoffs, I thought they're both obviously the weakest links, but I liked Vandenberg a lot more than Ben. I was really disappointed when they let Vandenberg go and they kept Ben. I think it's more of a contract thing. They couldn't get rid of him. They're stuck with him. He had some good games, and he looked good on Hughes, on the right side of Hughes, but he's just not. You're asking so much of him, and it's not fair that, okay, because he's your best fit with Hughes, you have him playing top number one pairing minutes. You're asking too much, and that's why these guys are getting scored on. He's okay with Hughes, but you constantly see him not knowing where to go and not providing a good outlet because he's overwhelmed. He's in over his head. The way Hughes is thinking the game and moving the game, Ben should not be playing with him. And I think Green doesn't feel like he has a lot of choice. But there's been some other defensemen that have played. I mean, Uelevi had some good games, and then Uelevi scores a goal, and they bench him, and they bring in Chatfield. Chatfield plays a good game, they keep him. Well, he's looked over his head. He's a young guy. He should be on the third pairing. Alex Edler should be on the third pairing. Second pairing at most. He's just slower and God, I love Edler. I like his attitude, and I like that he sacrifices himself and gets involved, but he's been taking a lot of bad penalties, man. He's just swinging that stick at people. He looks pissed, and not in a good way. Their defense is so bad right now. They could have really used Tanev and not bloody Myers. How good would it be if they didn't sign Myers? You could have kept Tanev. You could have kept Stetcher. You could have had Hughes and Tanev on the top line. You could have had Schmidt and maybe Edler, or Schmidt and like Uelevi, Schmidt and somebody on that second pairing. And then you could have had like Edler and Stetcher on the third pair. That would be a fantastic third pair. No, you don't have that. Uelevi sneaking in there and Chatfield sneaking in there and getting little looks and not being overused. Let's go back to these forward lines. JT Miller, you're starting to see why. You're starting to understand why he was ran out of New York and why Vigneault hated him. Because he is a little pouty brat. And he went from being the ultimate warrior in the playoffs and somebody that I constantly praised and said, this guy wants to win. This guy's going to force the team to win. This is a guy that can win Stanley Cups. And right now, he looks like he's one of the biggest parts of the problem. He's setting a really bad tone for this team. And he looks like a pretty dominating guy. Looks like Green is scared to take him off the line. Like, why don't you do something like this? Horvat and Höglander and Pearson have been playing your best hockey. So keep them as a line, number one. You put Pettersson and Besser, I guess, on the second line. And on the left, you put Tyler Mott, who's been great. And then you put Miller on the third line. Or you put Miller on the third line with Mott. And either as a winger or a center. And he's been terrible. I mean, he's getting points somehow. He keeps getting all these points, but it looks awful. Louis Eriksson, when he brought up Louis Eriksson and gave him Höglander's spot, there are so many ways this is terrible. Just, I couldn't believe it. Number one, Nils Höglander has been their absolute most effective, most consistent forward every night in these terrible losses. He started off super strong. He did have some games where he looked like he was figuring it out, but in the last, 4 or 5 games, he's been easily their best forward. Easily their best player is Höglander. The way he hits, how smart he is. He's getting pucks, he's getting shots, he's making things happen. So you took him, your most effective player, off your most effective line, and you put on Eriksson, who has no offense. And you put Eriksson, who is already slow, and now hasn't played for months, hasn't played a real game for months. And you put Eriksson on the line that doesn't need more defense, that needs to stay being offensive, and you put him up there, and you demote Höglander to play on your fourth line with Sutter and Justin Bailey. What the hell are you doing? Eriksson should have come on and taken Roussel's spot, or should have taken Gaudette's spot, and you put Eriksson with Sutter and Justin Bailey, and you have them go out there and they play some defense. Or you put Mott with Beagle and Eriksson. And and you have a defensive line. Or you make JT Miller play with Louis Eriksson as a punishment. And so that Miller stops getting scored on. Oh, Besser's been scoring. And I think his playmaking has improved. He looks faster. He still doesn't make the best decisions. He's not like a supreme playmaker. He has an elite shot and average playmaking and maybe above average sort of poise of the puck. I don't like him for the money, but I mean, could you imagine getting rid of one of your only consistent guns? What's he got for stats? Besser, 9 goals in 15 games, 5 assists. Anytime I see somebody who has almost twice as many goals and assists, total red flag. Like Tyler Mott, 5 goals, 1 assist. I mean, he's not playing with anyone he can assist, so that's different. But you know when like David Clarkson has a breakout year, whenever these guys have a breakout year and they score more goals and assists, red flag. Don't sign with anything more than 1 year, because they're gonna regress. They're gonna drop back down, and their goals are gonna match their assists again. It's just how it is. They either get a bunch of lucky goals, they opportunistic, maybe on the power play, getting some empty netters, get like 5 or 10 kind of extra goals here and there, and it can be nice, but you can't trust it. Horvat started off real strong, and he's being dragged down by the team. He's not been super effective, but I just think that it's a team game, and when your defense can't start the play, what are you going to do? You can't just go end to end over. I mean, there's only so many times you're going to go end to end and score. And if the other team has been playing defense and not letting you just walk in the way Toronto walked in on Vancouver, he can only score so many goals like that. It's like, it's what I love about Höglander is that he doesn't just score the breakaways and the 2-on-1s and stuff, which is great. You need to score finishing goals. You need to score when you get set up in the slot. You need to score on odd man rushes. You need to score when you get breakaways. But you also need to score the ways Höglander's been doing it, where you're like chipping him in, you're jamming him in, the way Tanner Pearson has. And if you can score in all those situations, then you're going to get good totals. But somebody like Virtanen, he scores when the opportunity comes, which is good. He can finish, but he doesn't create any opportunities. He's been okay in a game or two. I think he's been definitely better than Roussel and Gaudette. I just don't understand why Roussel keeps playing. Is it pressure from management? Ownership? Are they saying stop benching our guys that are expensive? Roussel I get it. Roussel's trying to get out there and he's trying to agitate people and he's trying to play his game, but it just doesn't work. All he does is go out there and take penalties. And I'm trying to think of the last time I saw a player in the other team get angry and from something he's instigated. All that happens is that the refs hate him. They won't call a penalty against him, and it has to be super blatant. Refs are fine watching Roussel get slashed in the face. They don't care. And because they're just watching him, they think that he's going to dive, and then when the game gets close at the end, they just throw him out. Game misconduct. We don't want your BS here. Pearson has been great. I heard some crazy stat that since Pearson joined the Canucks, he has the most goals. He's scoring some dirty goals. He's making things happen. He's not like a superstar, but he's the kind of player you need at that kind of money. Sutter would be just fine on the fourth line. Beagle, great on the fourth line. Tyler Mott, fourth line, third line tweener, who I wouldn't mind getting to see a chance up and down the lineup. But is it too late? I mean, what are you going to do? What is this team going to do? I think that our only hope is that if Aquilini has realized the error in his ways, which I doubt, gets rid of Benning and gets somebody in that has maybe a more modern approach. I think Benning is a pretty old school guy in a very modern world and just seems completely ill-equipped to be a general manager. He has made some decent trades. Yes. He got Mott through trade. He got Pearson through trade. He got Miller by trading a first. Good deal for a guy that led your team. He drafted Höglander. He drafted Pettersson. He drafted Hughes. Hughes was a no-brainer. And then he signed Roussel, Beagle, traded for Sutter. Traded for Sutter and then went and got Beagle. That was a terrible idea. Oh my God. He's heralded as the king of drafting, and he gives away all his draft picks. But that could be just from Aquilini, who's like, gotta win now, man. Well, come on, let's get out there. Let's try to win on the fly. Get some veterans. I get the idea that you get these veterans to insulate the team, because what happened in Edmonton is they lost all the time in Buffalo, and it just created this losing culture. But they don't have... they look like a bunch of losers. Although these guys, they did look better in the playoffs than they did now, obviously. But they still, on their bad games, they look this bad. They just had better games and better periods. And I think it's because they just had the defense was better at activating it, and Toffoli was a big help, and Levo didn't play in the playoffs, but his ability to move up and down the lineup is fantastic. You have a guy like Levo who can play in your top six in a pinch and can actually add some punch to that third line. Like, that's the kind of guy you want on your bottom six. He's responsible. He's a good size. He can play up and down the lineup. And you let him go. You didn't give him he would have stayed for a minimum contract. You could have given that guy like 2 years minimum. Benning doesn't know how to work the cap. He can't multitask. He doesn't know how to talk to his players. He screwed them. He's screwed them every year, other than a few little moves here and there. And Aquilini, Benning, Green, Miller. This team looks so out of sorts. Hopefully, here's the silver lining. Not silver lining. Here's the sort of best case scenario. It's exhaustion mostly, and that the exhaustion and being the pandemic is affecting their play so that they're out of sync, and they're going to get it together. They haven't had much practice time. They're going to get their systems going. The new players are going to figure it out. And they're going to at least start playing non-embarrassing hockey. And then next year, Sutter will be gone. All right. And they'll have to give all this money to Pettersson and Hughes. So, oh my God, what are they going to do? Benning is not a good general manager. Obviously. He failed his way. He got promoted until failure. He's probably the perfect assistant general manager. And now he's the Canucks general manager. I'll be watching the next game. I'll be watching to see Höglander. I just feel like, oh God, when you have these great players like Höglander and Pettersson and Hughes, you think, oh, can we please be good so that they don't want to leave? Because you see all these young guys leaving teams now. They just demand a trade. I don't like it here. I'm out of here. And they get their wish and they go from Winnipeg to Columbus or Columbus to Winnipeg. I'm going to be watching to see what Höglander does. I'm going to see if Green can have some better lines. Louis Eriksson better not be on that Horvat line. And I wouldn't mind seeing Miller get moved around. Pettersson's looked better. He still looks a little bit off, but he's better. If Pettersson's off, no wonder the whole team is, right? But with defense, get you a Levy back in there. And you need to stop playing these guys and big like Jordy Ben and Tyler Myers and Chatfield. They need to stop playing big minutes. Ugh. I feel so bad for the goalies. Did you saw Holtby in the last game? When he got scored on 4-0, he just took his helmet off and shook his head. I think he was actually yelling at Miller too. Because Miller was just stopped skating. He was just watching. He thought, wow, look at those guys go. And I don't think it's just like a we got to work hard. They are working hard. It's just their systems are not, the way they're playing their systems, either the systems are bad, or they're not executing it properly, or they don't have the talent to execute it. But the way that they are playing as a team is not helping anybody. It's all these individual actions. If the puck gets dumped in, if you don't go to your right spot, and the defenseman doesn't have anybody to pass to, then it's over. And then you're kind of spending that whole shift getting the puck out of your own end. If you can't get that puck out, get up into the neutral ice, at least. And then try to get in the offensive zone and start sustaining some pressure. But you can do that with what? The Höglander line and maybe the Mott line, and then you got these other two lines that just can't do jack shit. So there's no extended pressure. And then it seems like they get some pressure, and then they just give up a rush the other way, and Matthews dipsy doodles like he's playing a video game. And he's figured out the glitch goal. Good Lord. I'll see you after the next game. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good one. Bye.